All right, guys. I am gonna come up with a bold prediction. I think that Oscar Piastri is going to beat Lando Norris this year. Um, it seems bold. It seems crazy. This is Oscar's second year in Formula One. This is Lando's sixth year in Formula One. How could Oscar, the sophomore, beat him? I think it's pretty clear, right? So first of all, Oscar is only really 32 points behind Lando, which if you think about it, let's say Oscar wins a race and Lando DNQs, that is 25 points right there, right? So the gap is big, but it's not actually that big. Plus, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 more races. Oscar just needs to average 10 more points per race. Sorry, just needs to average three more points per race than Lando in order to beat him. I don't think that's that crazy, especially if you look at their last four races. Right, Oscar has 50. Sorry, I just got an email. Oscar has 80 points, and Lando has 33, 39, 49. Right, so Oscar already has scored 30 more points over the past four races than Lando. I don't think that this pace is going to keep up. Obviously, I think Oscar had just had a bunch of pretty good races, and Lando just had a couple of pretty bad races. But the 3 point difference in the standings is basically the difference between one place, right? So Oscar just needs and that's what I think is actually what makes this very possible, right? Is that Oscar just needs to average one place ahead of Lando throughout the rest of the season, right? Because the difference between first and second is 7. The difference between second and third is 3. The difference between third and fourth is 3, right? And they're not really going to be out of the top 5, top 7 that much this year, right? Moreover, I think that an even stronger argument for it is that if you look at where this gap between Lando Norris and Oscar comes from, it is from the beginning of the season, right? So in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I really should have done this math beforehand. I'm just doing it on the fly. But just look at the first 6 races, right? So Oscar 24, 28, 32, 38, 41 points, right? Lando has 40, 50, 71, 79, 83 points, right? So basically what happened in the season, there's the pretty strong case for Oscar is that he is still a sophomore. He is getting better every single race during the season. Lando is kind of where he is at his career right now. He's not really going to improve that much, while Oscar has been improving rapidly throughout the season. If you're asking me what is this season? What is the rest of the season going to more closely resemble? The first 5 races or the last 5 races? Even though I don't think that Oscar is going to have the same momentum for the last 5. I don't think I don't think Oscar's going to keep up the momentum he's had over the last 5 races for the next 10 races. However, I do think that it's crazy to think that the next 10 races are not going to more closely resemble the last 5 races than the first 5 races of the season. Because again, Oscar Piastri, is new to Formula One, is still learning. He's getting better every single race, right? Um, and I think that what we've kind of learned about Lando is that in every single sport, there's just those guys that never quite get to the mountaintop, right? In basketball, there's Charles Barkley, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. In football, for a while it was Peyton Manning, but there are those quarterbacks or those players who just can't seem to get there, and it seems that Lando Norris is that guy, right? He's that guy who is pretty good, is just good enough to be in the conversation, but isn't good enough to take that extra step. And so, I think Oscar beats him. And then the question at the end of the season, and it's not really going to be that much of a question, is Oscar Piastri the number one driver for McLaren, right? And the answer is going to be pretty clearly yes. The only people who are going to be saying no are people who just are way too bought into what has happened before, but like if Oscar Piastri beats Lando Norris in the same machinery in his second year in Formula One, it's clearly going to be Oscar Piastri's team. The question is, what happens to Lando after the end of the year, if he loses to Oscar? Even if he doesn't lose to Oscar, by the way, like let's say he beats Oscar by like 1 or 2 points. Like this isn't Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, where like even when Carlos Sainz was beating Charles Leclerc, it was clear that it was Charles Leclerc's team. Like Oscar Piastri is more of a hot commodity than Lando Norris because of the fact that Lando Norris has this sort of like 6 year albatross of not winning a race, right? Well, Oscar Piastri did it in his second year. So the question now is like, what happens to Lando Norris, right? Because one thing that you see a lot in Formula One is that like when the wrong driver is winning, the team will say, we don't have a number one. But then when the right driver starts winning, the team will say, no, we have a number one and it's him, right? Like you saw this, a lot during Ferrari. You see this happen a lot with these types of issues, and I think that like even given Zach Brown and Lando Norris's like long relationship with each other, I think it's clear that if by next if Oscar Piastri beats Lando Norris, then by next year he is going to be a championship contender against Max Verstappen, and so Zach Brown has to ask himself the question: is he going to do this faux like, oh, they're all equal type of thing, or is he going to put everything behind Oscar? And if he does, then I think that Lando Norris is going to start looking for the exit as quickly as possible. The problem for Lando Norris, though, is that, like, where does he go, right? Because, like, Ferrari is locked up. They have Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes has Kimi Antonelli and George Russell. He could feasibly go to Red Bull. Like, that's a possibility, especially given the friendship that him and Max Verstappen have. But that, like, how should I say this? Like, that kind of reminds me a little bit of, like, Forrest Gump a little bit, right? Where, like, last year, Helmut Marko was salivating over Lando Norris, and he was saying, like, oh, like, we'll really love Lando Norris to come here. And that was last year, right? But next year and the year after that, Red Bull are going to be severely hobbled. So it's kind of the question of, like, you were pining over Jenny when she was 19 at the University of Alabama. Oh, no, I guess she went to Auburn. But now she's 33 with AIDS and a child. Like, do you still want that, Lando? Do you still want 33-year-old Red Bull with AIDS and a child? Who knows? Red Bull can turn it around, but, it's been looking kind of dismal. My theory with Red Bull, to be honest with you, my theory is that I think that this entire plunge this season is like a four-dimensional chess move from Christian Horner. But that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, so that's my thought. I think it's pretty clear that Oscar is going to beat Lando. Like, you just look at the numbers. Like, it's the writing's on the wall.